The Galactic Tribunal had ruled the stars for 3 million years. 12 species, ancient beyond human understanding, sat in a chamber made of living crystal on a world so old that its sun had died and been replaced twice. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched young species crawl from their oceans, build their first fires, and reach for the sky. And when those species became dangerous, the tribunal erased them. It was not cruelty. It was maintenance. The galaxy was a garden, and some weeds had to be pulled before they choked the flowers. Today, they discussed Earth. Commander Una stood before the 12 elders, her observation report glowing on the display behind her. She had spent 40 years watching the small blue world, hidden behind the moon humans called Luna, recording everything. Their wars, their art, their terrifying, beautiful, insane ambition. They split the atom 80 years ago, Una said. They have already used it as a weapon against themselves. The eldest of the tribunal, a being of light and shadow called the First Voice, flickered with something like amusement. They bombed their own kind with nuclear fire. Twice. 2 cities. Hundreds of thousands dead in seconds. Una pulled up the images. The mushroom clouds. The shadows burned into stone. And then they built more. Thousands more. Enough to destroy their world many times over. Madness, said another elder, a creature of crystalline thought. They are clearly defective. No, Una said quietly. They are not defective. They are afraid. And when humans are afraid, they build weapons. She changed the display. Charts and graphs appeared. Growth curves that climbed like mountains. In 4,000 years, they went from bronze swords to nuclear bombs. Our models predict they will discover faster than light travel within 2 centuries. And within 1,000 years after that. She did not need to finish. The projection showed it clearly. A wave of red spreading across the galaxy. Human colonies. Human ships. Human influence, touching every corner of known space. The First Voice dimmed. They would challenge us? They would replace us, Una said. Not because they hate us. They do not even know we exist. But because that is what humans do. They spread. They adapt. They overcome. It is their nature, as unchangeable as gravity. Silence fell over the chamber. The 12 elders communicated in ways Una could not perceive. Waves of thought, quantum entanglements. Ancient protocols developed before Earth's sun had finished forming. Finally, the First Voice spoke. The vote is called. Extinction Protocol 7 for the species known as humanity. All in favor? 12 lights glowed in agreement. The motion carries. Admiral Taiho will execute the order. Una bowed and left the chamber. She did not look back. She had done her duty. What came next was not her concern. Admiral Taiho received the order aboard his flagship, the Absolute Certainty. He was old for his species, nearly 600 years, and he had carried out 11 extinction protocols in his career. This would be his 12th and final mission before retirement. He studied the target world on his display. Blue and green and white. Swirling clouds. Vast oceans. It looked peaceful from space. They always did. Navigation, he called. Set course for the Sol system. Standard approach vector. We will position the fleet beyond their detection range and begin bombardment at dawn, local time. Lieutenant Jiwan, his navigation officer, began inputting the coordinates. She was young, barely 90 years old, and this was her first extinction mission. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked. The coordinates for Sol were complex. The system sat in a busy region of the galaxy, surrounded by dust clouds and gravitational anomalies. The safe approach required precise calculations, dozens of variables. Hundreds of decimal points, all perfectly aligned. G1 worked carefully. She checked her numbers twice, 3 times, but she was nervous. Her species had evolved on a world of eternal twilight, and the harsh lights of the bridge hurt her eyes. She blinked, and in that moment, her finger slipped 1 digit. 1 decimal point. Moved 1 place to the left. The error was tiny, invisible. The computer accepted the coordinates without complaint. "Course laid in, Admiral," G1 announced. "Fleet is ready for translation." Taiho nodded. "Signal all ships." Translation in 30 seconds. 600 warships powered their drives. Reality bent around them, folding space, preparing to hurl them across the light years in an instant. Translation in 10 seconds. G1 counted. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, translating. The fleet vanished from tribunal space. And reappeared inside the sun. G1 had calculated the exit point as 1.0 astronomical units from Sol, but her error had made it 0.1 astronomical units. Not near Earth's orbit. Inside the star itself, the absolute certainty emerged into an ocean of nuclear fire. Temperature readings spiked beyond measurement. The hull, designed to withstand the cold vacuum of space, began to melt in ICROSECONDS. Admiral Taiho had one moment of terrible clarity. He saw his display showing impossible readings. He saw his crew dissolving into plasma around him. He saw 593 ships dying in the same instant, their crews never even understanding what had happened. Then there was only light and heat, and nothing. 7 ships survived. They had been at the edge of the formation, their translation drives slightly out of sync. They emerged just outside the corona, their hulls burning but intact. Their crews scrambled to reverse course, to escape the gravitational pull of the star that had just devoured their fleet. Lieutenant Commander Bile, suddenly the highest-ranking officer alive, took command of the survivors. She ordered an immediate retreat. There was no thought of completing the mission. There was only survival. As her ship fled the Sol system, she looked back at the star that had killed her admiral, her fleet, her friends. It burned yellow-white against the darkness, peaceful and unchanged. And then she saw something that made her blood freeze. Signals, radio waves, millions of them, erupting from the third planet. Humanity had detected the mass loss event in their sun. They had seen the ships emerge and die. Their telescopes and satellites were already analyzing the debris, the radiation signatures, the unmistakable evidence of artificial vessels. They knew. Humanity knew they were not alone. And they knew something had just tried to kill them. Bile transmitted her report to Tribunal Command with shaking hands. The mission had failed. The extinction fleet was destroyed. And the target species was now aware of the threat. She did not know what would happen next. No one did. In 3 million years of tribunal rule, no extinction protocol had ever failed. But she knew one thing with terrible certainty. Humanity would not forget. And humanity would not forgive. Behind her, Earth's radio signal screamed into the void, carrying news of the attack to every corner of the small blue world. 8 billion humans looked up at their sun with new eyes, and they began to prepare. Fleet Admiral Do Yun stood on the bridge of the Unconquered, the largest warship humanity had ever built. Around him, 400 vessels waited in formation: cruisers, destroyers, carriers, support ships, a fleet that would have been unimaginable just 50 years ago. Each ship carried crew members from every nation on Earth, united by a purpose that transcended borders and languages. They had gathered at the edge of the Veiled Nebula, a region of space so dense with radiation and debris that even the Tribunal avoided it. Beyond the nebula lay the Council world, the heart of the empire that had tried to murder humanity. The final battle waited on the other side. Admiral, his sensor officer reported. Tribunal fleet detected. 600 ships holding position at the far edge of the nebula. They know we are coming. Dohyun nodded slowly. 600 ships, more than the humans had. But he had expected this. The tribunal was defending their capital, their pride, everything they had built across 3 million years. They would throw everything they had into this fight. They want us to go through the nebula, his tactical officer, Lieutenant Subin, said. She was young, barely 25, but she had a gift for seeing patterns that others missed. The radiation will blind our sensors. The debris will damage our ships. By the time we emerge, we will be scattered and weak. What do you suggest? Dohyun asked. Subin pulled up a display showing the nebula's interior. Swirling clouds of gas and dust, lit from within by dying stars. It looked like chaos. I have been studying the nebula for weeks, she said. The radiation is not random. It follows patterns, currents, like rivers flowing through the gas. If we ride those currents instead of fighting them, we can move faster, and we can exit. She marked a point on the display. Here, behind their defensive line. The bridge went silent. What she was suggesting was insane. Threading a fleet through a radioactive maze, trusting mathematical models over survival instincts, gambling everything on the calculations of a junior officer. Dohyun looked at the display, then at Subin, then at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for his decision. Beyond the windows, the nebula glowed like a wound in space. Humanity did not come this far by playing it safe, he said finally. Lieutenant Subin, you will navigate the fleet. All ships, follow her course exactly. And may whatever gods exist forgive us if she is wrong. The fleet entered the nebula dot. It was like sailing into hell. Radiation alarms screamed. Hull integrity warnings flashed. The stars disappeared behind walls of burning gas, leaving the ships blind except for Subin's calculations. Crew members prayed in a dozen languages. Some cried. Some laughed. All of them kept their stations. Subin's voice was calm as she called out course corrections. Adjust heading 2 degrees starboard. Reduce speed by 15%. Prepare for turbulence. The unconquered shook as it hit a pocket of dense matter. Dohyun gripped his chair, watching the reading spike into dangerous territory, then slowly fall back. We are through, Subin announced. Next current in 30 seconds. Hours passed. Or maybe it was days. Time lost meaning in the burning depths of the nebula. Ships reported damage, casualties, systems failures. But they kept moving, following the young lieutenant's voice through the darkness. And then, suddenly, they were out. The fleet emerged from the nebula's far side in perfect formation. Ahead of them, the tribunal fleet waited facing the wrong direction. Their weapons pointed at the nebula's expected exit, their sensors blinded by the radiation. Behind them, Dohyun allowed himself one moment of satisfaction. Then he gave the order. All ships, fire. The human fleet unleashed everything it had. Missiles by the thousands streaked across the void. Energy weapons drew lines of fire through the darkness. The tribunal ships, caught completely off guard, began to die before they could even turn around. It was slaughter. But it did not stay that way for long. The tribunal commanders recovered quickly. Their ships wheeled to face the new threat, their weapons finally finding targets. Human vessels began to take hits, their shields flaring, their hulls buckling. The Defiance Junho ship lost its starboard engine to a direct hit. The Storm's Eye Yunji's replacement vessel sacrificed itself to shield a carrier from a torpedo volley. The battle became chaos. Ships twisted and burned around each other, so close the collision was as deadly as combat. Dohyun directed the fight from the unconquered, making decisions in heartbeats that affected thousands of lives. He saw the moment the battle turned. The tribunal flagship, a massive vessel called the Eternal Verdict, took a Singularity missile to its reactor core. The explosion consumed 3 nearby cruisers. Their formation broke. And once it broke, it shattered. Human ships poured through the gap, targeting command vessels, destroying coordination. The Tribunal fleet, so used to fighting as one perfect machine, fell apart when the machine began to fail. Individual captains made contradictory decisions. Ships collided with each other. Weapons fired on allies by mistake. 6 hours after it began, the battle ended. The Unconquered drifted through a graveyard of broken ships. Both fleets had been devastated. Half the human vessels were gone. The Tribunal Navy existed only as debris and distant survivors fleeing into the void. But the path to the Council world was clear. Do-hyun opened a channel to his remaining ships. His voice was hoarse with exhaustion, but steady. "This is Fleet Admiral Do-hyun. The Tribunal fleet is destroyed. The enemy capital lies before us. All ships capable of movement form up on my position. We have one more task to complete." The survivors gathered. 187 ships, many of them damaged. All of them crewed by exhausted, wounded, grieving people who had just fought the hardest battle of their lives. They formed a ragged line and followed their admiral toward the Council world. The planet was beautiful in a cold, ancient way. Silvery oceans reflected the light of a blue sun. Crystal spires rose from floating continents. Ships of 100 species orbited in careful patterns. Merchant vessels and diplomatic cruisers and pleasure craft that had never seen war. They scattered when the human fleet arrived. Do-hyun looked down at the world that had ordered humanity's extinction. Billions of beings lived on that surface, going about their lives, believing themselves safe under the Tribunal's protection. They had never imagined this moment. They had never thought it possible. "Open a channel," he said. "All frequencies. I want every being on that planet to hear this." The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Do-hyun stood. Behind him, his crew watched in silence. Around him, the greatest fleet humanity had ever built waited for his words. "This is Fleet Admiral Do-hyun of the United Earth Defense Force," he said. 90 years ago, you tried to kill our world. You failed. Now we stand above your capital, and your fleet is ashes." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We did not come here to destroy you. We came here to talk. Your tribunal has 1 hour to agree to negotiations. After that, we will begin landing troops." He cut the channel and sat back in his chair. The Council world gleamed in his view screen, beautiful and vulnerable, and finally, after 3 million years of unchallenged rule, afraid. "Now," Do-hyun said quietly, "we find out what kind of people we really are." Dr. Sujin had not slept in 3 days. Her eyes burned from staring at screens. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, and her hands would not stop shaking. But she could not rest. Not now. Not when everything humanity believed about the universe had just shattered like glass. She worked in a small observatory in the mountains, far from city lights. For 20 years, she had searched the stars for signs of intelligent life. She had written papers about the probability of alien civilizations. She had given lectures about the Fermi paradox, the strange silence of the cosmos, the absence of signals from other worlds. Now she understood that silence, and it terrified her. "Run it again," she told her assistant, a young man named Dong-wook, who looked as exhausted as she felt. "There has to be another explanation." Dong-wook shook his head. "I have run it 17 times, Dr. Sujin. The data is clear. Those were artificial structures, vessels, ships, and they appeared inside the sun and were destroyed." Sujin stared at the readings. The mass loss event had been brief, less than a second, but it had been enormous. Millions of tons of solar material, displaced by something appearing where nothing should be. The radiation signatures showed metals that did not exist on the periodic table. The debris patterns indicated structures, not asteroids. Ships, not rocks. Someone had tried to reach Earth, and the sun had killed them, but not all of them. 7 objects had escaped the corona. 7 ships had fled into the darkness between stars, damaged but alive. "They will come back," Sujin whispered. "Whatever they were, whoever sent them, they will come back." Within hours, her data was in the hands of every major government on Earth. Within days, the world knew the truth. And within weeks, everything changed. The old arguments seemed so small now. The border disputes, the trade wars, the endless political games, all of it became meaningless noise against the silence of the stars. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting itself. Now it faced something far greater. The United Nations held an emergency session that lasted for 9 days. Leaders who had been enemies for decades sat in the same room and talked about survival. It was not easy. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight. But fear is a powerful motivator, and every person on Earth shared the same fear now. Something out there had tried to kill them all, and it had almost succeeded. Engineer Hyunwoo led the team that would change everything. He was 53 years old, a specialist in materials science, and he had spent his career studying how things were made. Now he studied how to unmake the alien technology that had fallen to Earth. The debris was scattered across the Pacific Ocean, fragments of hull plating, pieces of machinery, shards of crystal that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Recovery teams worked around the clock, pulling the wreckage from the water and shipping it to laboratories around the world. Hyun-woo received his first sample on a Tuesday morning. It was a piece of hull plating, no larger than his hand, burned black by its passage through the sun. He held it up to the light and felt something strange, a tingling in his fingers. A sense of depth that should not exist in such a thin piece of metal. "It is not metal," he announced after a week of testing. "Not in any way we understand. The atomic structure is wrong. It exists in dimensions we cannot see. The material is folded in on itself, layer upon layer, in directions that should not exist." His assistant, a young woman named June, frowned at the readings. "That is impossible." "Clearly not," Hyun-woo said. "The material exists. We are holding it, which means our understanding of physics is incomplete." He smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. "They came to kill us with technology we cannot understand. So we will understand it. We will learn their secrets. And we will use those secrets to survive." It took 10 years. 10 years of failures, breakthroughs, setbacks, and triumphs. 10 years of scientists from every nation working together, sharing data, building on each other's discoveries. Hyun-woo lost his hair, gained wrinkles, and watched his daughter grow from a child into a young woman. But he never stopped working. The first human faster-than-light drive was tested on a clear night in the desert. The ship was small, barely large enough for a crew of 3 and ugly, a patchwork of human engineering and alien principles. But when it vanished from one side of the solar system and appeared on the other in less than a second, a cheer went up that could be heard for miles. Hyun-woo watched from the control room, tears streaming down his face. They had done it. Humanity had reached the stars, but the stars held dangers, and they all knew it. General Minji stood before the assembled leaders of Earth's new united government. She was 60 years old, a veteran of 3 wars that now seemed impossibly small, and she had been chosen to lead humanity's defense because she understood something that politicians often forgot. Survival required sacrifice. "We have 90 years, she said, pointing at the display behind her. "Our analysts have studied the alien vessels. They have calculated the distance to the nearest likely source. And they have estimated how long it will take for whoever sent those ships to build a new fleet and return. The room was silent. 90 years. It seemed like a long time. But Minji knew better. "We cannot wait for them," she continued. "If we sit here, if we hide on Earth and hope they forget about us, we will die. They tried to kill us once. They will try again. And next time, they will not make the same mistake." She changed the display. Maps appeared, star charts, marked with estimated positions of alien worlds, shipping lanes, military installations. "We go to them," Minji said. "We take the fight to their space. We make them understand that humanity is not prey. We are not victims. We are not a problem to be solved." She looked around the room, meeting every eye. "We are a force they should have feared. And now they will learn why." The first warships were built in orbit around Earth's moon. They were crude by alien standards, but they were fast, tough, and armed with weapons that combined human ingenuity with stolen alien technology. Crews trained in zero gravity, learning to fight in 3 dimensions, learning to think like soldiers of an interstellar war. Volunteers came from every nation. Farmers from Asia, engineers from Europe, soldiers from Africa and the Americas, pilots from Australia and the Pacific Islands. They spoke different languages, worshipped different gods, carried different histories. But they shared one thing, the knowledge that their world had been marked for death, and they refused to die. Hyan Wu watched the fleet depart from his laboratory window. 12 ships carrying humanity's best and brightest into the unknown darkness. His daughter June was aboard one of them, a navigation officer on a vessel called Hope's Edge. "Come back safe," he whispered to the stars, "and make them regret what they tried to do." The ships vanished in flashes of light, bending space around them, hurtling toward enemy territory at speeds that would have seemed like magic just a decade ago. Behind them, Earth continued to build. More ships, more weapons, more soldiers. The awakening was complete. Humanity was no longer sleeping, and the galaxy would never be the same. Captain Junho had been a fisherman before the awakening. He had spent his youth on small boats in rough seas, learning to read the water, to predict storms, to survive when nature turned hostile. Now he read the darkness between stars, and the storms he faced were made of plasma and antimatter. His ship, the Defiance, was the first human warship to cross into tribunal space. 300 crew members, all volunteers, all knowing they might never see Earth again. They had trained for years, studied every fragment of alien data recovered from the wreckage, prepared for every scenario they could imagine. Nothing had prepared them for what they found. The first tribunal patrol they encountered was a pair of cruisers, each 5 times the size of the Defiance. They were beautiful ships, their hulls carved from some iridescent material that shifted colors in the starlight, their weapons arrays gleaming like jewels. They had been designed to intimidate, to awe, to remind lesser species of their place in the galaxy. The battle lasted 4 minutes. Junho watched from his command chair as his weapons officer. A young woman named Yujin directed fire at the alien vessels. Human missiles, tipped with warheads that collapsed local space-time into momentary singularities, punched through the tribunal ships like needles through silk. The aliens' return fire was slow, predictable, following patterns that human tacticians had identified and countered months ago. "They fight like machines," Junho murmured. "No creativity. No adaptation." His first officer, Commander Siwan, nodded grimly. 3 million years of dominance. They have forgotten what it means to face an equal. The second cruiser exploded in a flash of white light. The Defiance sailed through the debris field, its crew silent, absorbing the magnitude of what they had done. "Send a message to Earth," Junho ordered. "Tell them the tribunal bleeds like anyone else." Word spread through the human fleet like fire through dry grass. The enemy could be beaten. The monsters who had tried to murder their world were not invincible. They were old, complacent, unprepared for a species that had been fighting since it learned to walk. Captain Yunji commanded the Storm's Eye, the fastest ship in the human fleet. She was 38 years old, small in stature, but large in presence, with eyes that seemed to see through walls and a voice that could cut through chaos. Her crew loved her. Her enemies would learn to fear her. Her scouts had found something. A structure at the edge of tribunal space, hidden in the shadow of a dying star. It was massive, larger than any station humanity had ever built. Larger than some moons, and it was producing ships at a rate that made Yunji's blood run cold. They are rebuilding their fleet, she told her officers. If they finish, they will have enough ships to burn Earth 100 times over. We cannot let that happen. She had 12 ships under her command. 12 against a station defended by 200 warships and automated weapon platforms beyond counting. The mathematics were simple. This was suicide. Her crew voted to attack anyway. The battle for the tribunal shipyard became legend. Human ships dove through defensive fire that would have shattered any vessel in the galaxy. They twisted and turned in patterns no tribunal computer could predict, dodging weapons that should have killed them, striking back with fury that bordered on madness. Yunji led from the front. The Storm's Eye took hit after hit, its hull burning, its systems failing one by one. But she refused to retreat. She pushed deeper into the station's defenses, drawing fire away from her other ships, giving them the opening they needed. Lieutenant Minsu, her chief engineer, worked miracles in the engine room. He held the ship together with nothing but willpower and spare parts, rerouting power through systems that should not have functioned, keeping the weapons firing when the computers said it was impossible. "We are almost there," Yunji called over the comm. "All ships, target the reactor core. Everything you have left. Everything." 12 human ships fired as one. Missiles, energy weapons, even chunks of debris accelerated to near light speed, all of it converging on a single point deep within the station. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. A new star blazed in the darkness, bright enough to burn the sensors of ships light years distant. The Tribunal shipyard, 3 million years of construction, 60% of their remaining production capacity, died in a moment of white fire. Yunji watched it from the shattered bridge of the Storm's Eye. Half her crew was dead. Her ship would never fly again. But she was smiling. "Message to Earth," she said, her voice rough with exhaustion and victory. "The road to their capital is open. And it is burning." The Tribunal had never known fear. Now they learned. Reports flooded into the Council world from every corner of their space. Human ships appearing without warning, striking targets, vanishing before response fleets could arrive. Supply convoys destroyed. Military bases silenced. Worlds that had been loyal for millions of years suddenly questioning whether the Tribunal could protect them. The first voice, eldest of the 12 rulers, listened to the reports in growing horror. This was not possible. Humanity was a young species, barely out of its cradle. They should not have this technology. They should not have this courage. They should not exist at all. We underestimated them, the first voice admitted to the empty council chamber. We saw their violence and called it madness. We saw their divisions and called it weakness. We saw their short lives and called it irrelevance. The display showed a map of tribunal space. Red dots marked human attacks, dozens of them now, spreading across the stars like a disease. "We were wrong," the first voice said. "Their violence is not madness. It is adaptation. Their divisions taught them to fight. Their short lives taught them to fight quickly, to waste nothing, to seize every moment." The other elders stirred uneasily. They had ruled for 3 million years. They had erased 1,000 species. They had never faced anything like this. What do we do? One of them asked. The first voice had no answer. On the Defiance, now docked at a captured tribunal supply station, Captain Junho received new orders from Earth. The main fleet was gathering. 400 ships, the largest human force ever assembled, would strike at the heart of tribunal space. The target, the council world itself. Junho read the orders twice, then looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, on a world older than Earth's sun, the beings who had ordered his planet's destruction waited in their crystal chambers. They wanted to execute us, he said softly. They wanted to wipe us from the universe like we were nothing, like we were weeds in their garden. Commander Siwan stood beside him. And now? Junho smiled. It was not a gentle smile. Now we show them what weeds can do when they grow through concrete. Set course for the rendezvous point. The war ends at the council world. The Defiance powered its engines and leaped into the stars, joining the burning road that humanity had carved through the darkness. Ambassador Hana walked through halls that had never known human footsteps. The corridor was ancient beyond understanding, its walls carved from crystal that sang softly in frequencies almost too low to hear. Light filtered through surfaces that seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3, casting shadows that moved wrong. She was 43 years old. Before the awakening, she had been a literature professor at a small university, teaching poetry to students who mostly wanted easier grades. Now she carried the voice of 8 billion people into the heart of an empire that had ruled the stars since before her species existed. 4 guards walked with her, soldiers in power armor, their weapons ready. Admiral Do-hyun had insisted. The tribunal had agreed to negotiations, but trust was a currency neither side possessed. The council chamber was vast. Its ceiling disappeared into darkness above. Its floor was a single piece of something like marble, but warm to the touch and faintly luminescent. And at its center, arranged in a circle of crystalline thrones, sat the 12 rulers of the galaxy. Hana had studied them. She knew their species, their histories, their psychology, but seeing them in person was different. The first voice was a being of light and shadow, constantly shifting, impossible to focus on. Others were crystalline or gaseous or shapes that hurt to look at directly. They were old, so impossibly, crushingly old, and they were afraid. She could see it in the way they sat, in the micro-movements of forms that had ruled without challenge for 3 million years. They had never faced this moment. They had never been forced to look up at something stronger than themselves. Hana stopped in the center of the chamber. She did not bow. She did not lower her eyes. "You tried to kill us," she said. Her voice echoed in the vast space, clear and steady. "Not because we had harmed you, not because we threatened you, but because your models predicted we might become a problem someday." The first voice flickered. "You do not understand. We have maintained peace in this galaxy for... I understand perfectly." Hana's voice cut through the ancient being's words like a blade. "You murdered civilizations because they were inconvenient. You burned worlds because they might, in some distant future, challenge your power. You appointed yourselves gods and judged entire species unworthy of existence." Silence fell over the chamber. The 12 rulers shifted uneasily. "We could do the same to you," Hana continued. "Every ship, every world, every memory of your existence, we have the power to erase it all. You gave us the motivation. You gave us the technology. And you gave us 90 years to prepare." She paused, letting them imagine it. The death of everything they had built. The end of 3 million years of history. They could see it now, in the human fleet orbiting their world, in the soldiers standing guard behind this small woman who spoke without fear. "Many of my people think we should," Hana said quietly. "They lost family in the war. They lost friends. They remember the terror of learning that something out there wanted them dead. and they want revenge. One of the crystalline rulers leaned forward. Then, why are you here? Why negotiate when you could simply destroy us? Hannah smiled. It was a small smile, tired and sad, because we are not you. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. She walked forward, past boundaries no human had ever crossed, and placed it on the ancient table that sat before the first voice. These are our terms. You will dismantle the tribunal, not reform it. Dismantle it. The age of 12 species deciding who lives and who dies is over. The first voice flickered angrily. You cannot. We can, Hannah said. And we will. But we are not asking you to surrender to humanity. We are asking you to join something new. A council where every species has a voice. Where no one world can order another's destruction. Where the galaxy governs itself through cooperation, not fear. She gestured at the data chip. The details are there. Trade agreements. Defense pacts. Dispute resolution mechanisms. Things humanity learned to build over centuries of fighting ourselves. We are not perfect. We are not wise. But we know how to share power because we had no choice but to learn. The eldest of the tribunal, a being whose species had achieved sentience when Earth was still molten rock, finally spoke. His voice was like wind through ancient trees. And if we refuse? Hannah looked at the ancient being. She thought about everything humanity had suffered. The terror of the awakening. The years of desperate preparation. The friends she had lost in the war. Captain Yunji, dead at the shipyard. Commander Siwan, killed in the final battle. Thousands of others whose names would fill monuments for generations. You will not refuse, she said, because you have seen what happens when you threaten humanity. You pointed a gun at our heads, and all you managed to do was wake us up. She turned and walked toward the door. Her guards fell into formation around her. At the threshold, she paused and looked back. One execution. One error. That is all it took to end your empire. Remember that, the next time you think about playing God. She walked out. Behind her, the galaxy's oldest empire began to crumble. 50 years later, the memorial stood on Luna's surface, visible from Earth on clear nights. It was a pillar of alien metal salvaged from the ships that had burned in Sol, reaching toward the stars that humanity now traveled freely. Names were carved into its surface, thousands of them. Every human who had fought and died in the Reckoning War. Admiral Do Yoon visited every year on the anniversary. He was old now, his hair white, his steps slow. But he still made the journey, still stood before the monument, still remembered that his granddaughter, Yeren, walked beside him. She was 20 years old, a cadet in the Galactic Peacekeeping Fleet, the organization that had replaced the Tribunal, governed by a council of 200 species. Humans among them. Grandfather, she said, looking up at the towering pillar, do you ever regret any of it? Do-hyun was silent for a long moment. He thought about the battles, the deaths, the terrible choices he had made. He thought about friends lost and enemies destroyed. He thought about the young man he had been, full of fear and fury, sailing into the unknown to fight gods. Regret? He looked up at the stars that humanity now called home. Colonies on 100 worlds. Ships traveling trade routes that span the galaxy. Children growing up under alien suns, never knowing the fear that had defined their ancestors' lives. They tried to execute us, Yeren. They decided our species should die before we even knew they existed. All we did was survive. He smiled, and in that smile was everything humanity had learned about itself in the century since the awakening. The violence and the compassion. The fury and the forgiveness. The stubborn, impossible, beautiful refusal to accept extinction. And we reminded the galaxy what survival looks like. Above them, a ship descended through Luna's thin atmosphere, a merchant vessel. its crew a mix of humans and aliens, carrying goods between worlds that had learned to live together. It passed over the monument without stopping, just one small part of a vast civilization that had been built on the ashes of old empires. Naren watched it go. Then she looked at her grandfather, at the names carved in alien metal, at Earth hanging blue and green in the lunar sky. "Do you think they will ever try again?" she asked. Another species, another tribunal, another attempt to decide who deserves to exist. Do-hyun put his arm around her shoulders. Maybe. The universe is vast, and there will always be those who think they have the right to judge others. He looked up at the stars, at the infinite darkness between them, at all the wonders and terrors still waiting to be discovered. But if they do, they will find us ready. Not because we want to fight, but because we learned something important when they tried to kill us. What is that? Do-hyun's smile widened. That humanity is very, very hard to kill, and very, very slow to forget. The stars shone down on the memorial, on the old admiral and the young cadet, on the world that had refused to die. And somewhere in the depths of space, in council chambers and trading posts and ships traveling between worlds, the story was told again. The story of one execution, one error, and a species that had burned its way to the stars. The galaxy remembered, and humanity endured.